What's up everyone, Darcblade here with another Hunter's Guide to Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. In this video, we're going to be demonstrating some full set budget builds for the switch axe. Now, what is a full set budget build? Well, it's a build that you can take through the story of Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak quite comfortably. It also consists of one armor type, so there's no mixing and matching, so you can focus on one monster, get all the armor pieces you need, and then have a build that is strong enough to get you through the game's story. Now, as always, if you find these builds helpful or useful, please consider subscribing to the channel as well as leaving a like on the video, as it really does help. So when it comes to the switch axe is a very damage focused weapon. It can deal high amounts of damage to monsters, but sacrifices mobility in doing so. Whilst not completely immobile, players will have to get used to switching between axe and sword mode, as well as utilising the various silkbind moves to counter this aspect of the weapon. When it comes to the builds I use, most of them are damage focused, but a few of them have quality of life skills to help make hunts feel easier and counter the shortcomings of the weapon. So the first full set budget build, I simply call the general purpose switch axe build. Or if you want a more colourful name, I call it the Death Stench build. This build utilises the entire Death Stench set, combined with a non-elemental weapon, which means that it can be used against any monster. So for this build, you'll need the entire Death Stench set, which includes the Death Stench brain, muscles, grips, bowels, and heel. For your petalace, this is down to personal preference, but I'm using an absolute petalace for some extra health and survivability. And then for your talisman, unfortunately no one has the exact same talismans out there. But if you can, try to get a talisman that has or allows you to get maxed out Wirebug Whisperer on it. And finally for the weapon, I'm using the Rex Thrasher, which is the Tigrex switch axe. Now, depending on how far you've got through the game, the level of the switch axe may differ, as in the video here I'm showing the absolutely maxed out version of the Tigrex switch axe. As for the rampage skill, this is down to personal preference depending on what decoration slot the weapon you're using has in it. Now, a quick reminder that to get the Death Stench armor, you actually get the materials or the key materials from doing the Meow Snaries. This material is known as Sinister Gloomcloth. To do this effectively, it's normally a case of sending them off to locations that have glittering bone piles. But personally, my Meowcenaries really only brought them back from the sandy plains, but that just may be my luck. So when it comes to the decorations, you've got a few to play around with, and there are some optional ones here. So I've gone for Tenderizer Jaws to max out Weakness Exploit, Critical Jaws to max out Crit Boost, a Brace Jaw for a point in Flinch Free, this is optional, a Sated Jaw for a point in Free Mill, again another optional one, and then a Wirebug Jaw to max out Wirebug Whisperer. Now, I will say that you can drop Wirebug Whisperer if you want to and instead put a Jumping Jaw in its stead, especially if you're not confident with the elemental burst counter found on the switch axe. So if you've done what I've done here, you'll have a build with 404 raw attack, which can be higher depending if you're in sword or axe mode with no element. You'll have purple sharpness and 10% base affinity, which will be 60% affinity when you take into account both maximum might and weakness exploit. You'll also have an exhaust file rating of 30, and you'll have a strong defense of 711 that is strong against fire, water, thunder, and dragon, but unfortunately weak to ice. So when it comes to the skills, first of all, you'll have attack boost at level 4, increasing the raw attack of this build, and at level 4 or above, it also gives us a percentage bonus to our raw attack. You'll then have critical boost at level 3, increasing the damage of our hits when they crit a monster, but this only applies to the raw portion of an attack, not the elemental portion. You'll then have weakness exploit at level 3, allowing us to increase our affinity whenever we're attacking monster weak points. Weakness exploit at level 3 can potentially provide us a bonus 50% extra affinity. You'll then have maximum might at level 3, increasing our base affinity whenever we have full stamina. You'll then have protected polish at level 3, which is definitely a useful skill considering we only have a small portion of purple sharpness on our weapon. Protected polish allows us to put a protective coating over our sharpness gauge, preventing any sharpness loss for a small duration of time whenever we sharpen our weapon. This also works well in unison with the next skill, which is speed sharpening, allowing us to quickly sharpen our weapon and thus apply that protective coating. You'll then have Wirebug Whisperer at level 3, or potentially level 2. Wirebug Whisperer is a skill that reduces the cooldown time when it comes to using wirebugs, as well as how long we can keep other additional wirebugs. Now, as I mentioned in the duel section, if you drop this down to level 3, you will instead have a point in evade extender, allowing us to hop and dodge greater distances, which is more useful if you prefer that to the switch axe new counter mechanic. You'll then have Rapid Morph at level 3, which increases the speed and damage of our morph attacks. You'll then have Free Meal at level 1, which is an optional skill that gives us a chance at not using a potion or other consumable when we use it, which is useful for our supplies when we're going through the story of Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. You then have Fortify at level 1, which is a useful skill that whenever we faint and cut, will come back with increased raw attack and defense. This can be applied 2 times during a hunt. And then finally you'll have Flinch Free at level 1, which allows our hunter to ignore minor knockbacks from monsters as well as our allies. So there we have it, that is the Death Stench build, the Death Stench general purpose build I should call it. It's definitely a strong rarity 8 build and can get you very far through the game. The only difficult part about it is unfortunately finding that sinister Gloomcloth from the Meowcenaries. But every build out there has pros and cons. When it comes to this build, its biggest pro is its raw damage output. Attack boost, critical boost, weakness exploit, maximum might and rapid morph, they all add to our damage output, allowing us to take monsters down relatively quickly with this build. Next up is that this build, despite only having a small amount of purple sharpness, it has quite a few sharpness management skills, allowing us to keep that purple sharpness for longer. This is thanks to protected polish and speed sharpening. And then finally is that this build does have a few quality of life skills. From Wirebug Whisperer, Free Meal, Fortify and Flinch Free, these will all make hunts feel a little bit easier than they are. But of course there are cons. One of the biggest cons for this build is it does lack a little bit when it comes to defensive skills. However, our main defense is going to be our Elemental Burst counter, and if you don't like to use this, then you can drop a point in Wirebug Whisperer and have a point in Evade Extender, which will also add to our defense. And the other con is, unfortunately, the sinister Gloomcloth is a little bit difficult to get, so you always have to make sure you're using the Meowcenaries in order to craft this strong armor set. But should you do it, you'll have quite a powerful early game armor set that should take you through the majority of Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak's story. But once you get far enough through the story, you may want to upgrade to a stronger, more potent armor set, and thus another full set budget build. To which the next build for the Switch Axe I refer to as the Bloodright budget build. Build makes use of the full Malzeno set, allowing us to leech the health off of opponents, keeping us alive without having to stop to drink a potion. It's also quite powerful when it comes to DPS skills, and it also combines quality of life and survival aspects as well. So, for the Bloodright build, you'll need the following armor pieces. You'll need the full Malzeno set, which includes the Malzeno helm, Malzeno mail, Malzeno braces, Malzeno coil, and the Malzeno greaves. Again, I'm using the Absolute Petalace, but this is optional. And then for your talisman, again, depending on what you have available, it may differ to what I'm showing here, but go for a talisman that has the ability to get Rapid Morph maxed out and a point in critical boost. As for my weapon, I'm using Zarella's Phantasm, which is the Chameleos Switch Axe. And when it comes to the Rampage skill, it depends on what you want to use. It's pretty much down to personal preference. Most of the time I take the various anti-decorations to give us a boost to our raw attack. So as for the decorations, again you've got a fair few to play around with. So I've gone for Critical Jaws to max out crit boost, Steadfast Jaws for points in stun resistance, this is kind of optional, Destroyer Jaws to max out Partbreaker, Protection Jaws for points in Divine Blessing, Grinder Jaws to max out Speed Sharpening, Jumping Jaws for points in Evade Extender, and a Brace Jaw for a point in Flinch Free. So if you've done what I've done here, you'll have a raw attack of 383, which can be higher depending if you're in axe or sword mode, with 40 poison rating. You also have a decent chunk of purple sharpness. You have no base affinity, but this is at least 50% when you take into account weakness exploit, and you'll have power files. You'll also have a strong defense of 751 that is exceedingly strong against water and thunder, but unfortunately weak to the other elements, especially dragon. As for the switch skills, once again, they're down to personal preference. So when it comes to the skills, first of all you have attack boost at level 4, increasing the raw damage of this build. You then have critical boost at level 3, increasing the damage of our critical attacks. You'll then have weakness exploit at level 3, allowing us to potentially have 50% base affinity whenever we're attacking monster weak points. You'll then have divine blessing at level 3, which gives us a chance at taking reduced damage should we take a hit from a monster. You'll then have blight resistance at level 3, negating all elemental blights against our hunter. You'll then have stun resistance at level 3, negating all stun effects on our hunter. You'll then have Partbreaker at level 3, which makes it easier to break or sever monster body parts, and this is tied into the Bloodright skill, which we'll talk about in a moment. You'll then have Speed Sharpening at level 3, allowing us to quickly sharpen our weapon and regain that purple sharpness. You'll then have Wirebug Whisperer at level 3, increasing the effectiveness of our wirebugs, allowing them to cool down more quickly, hold the additional wirebug for longer, so on and so forth. You'll then have Rapid Morph at level 3, increasing the speed and damage of our morph attacks, and then you'll have Bloodright at level 3, which is the whole crux of this build. Basically, whenever we're attacking a monster body part that has been broken, a portion of the damage dealt to that broken body part will be transferred to our hunter, healing them. This is the reason why we have part breaker maxed out, so we can break monster body parts more easily and create more hit zones on a monster that will be able to heal us. This potentially means that we don't have to stop our assault and drink a potion should we be damaged. You'll then have Stamina Thief at level 2, which is a byproduct of our talisman. This increases our effectiveness when it comes to exhausting monsters, not really needed on this build. You'll then have Evade Extender at level 2, increasing the distance at which we dodge and evade, and then you'll have Flinch Free at level 1, which prevents minor knockbacks from monsters and our allies. So there we have it, that is the Bloodright build. Quite a strong build and should see you into anomaly hunts, and up to the point where you want to start making mix sets. But every build out there has pros and cons. When it comes to this build, one of its pros is its decent damage output. Whilst maybe not the highest damage output out there, it's still nonetheless able to take down monsters quickly thanks to attack boost, crit boost, weakness exploit, rapid morph, and the poison element we have on our weapon. On top of that, this build has a ton of quality of life and defensive skills. From Divine Blessing to Blight Resistance, Stun Resistance, Speed Sharpening, and more, these will all make the hunts feel easier than they are. And the final pro is the Bloodright itself, able to heal us whilst we're in combat. But of course, there are cons. One of the biggest cons is unfortunately this build may sometimes have sharpness issues, as you may be able to burn through the purple sharpness we have quite quickly. This is countered slightly thanks to speed sharpening, but it's still an issue nonetheless. And the other con is unfortunately we can't make use of Bloodright when we're attacking monster body parts that have not been broken. So against monsters that have few zones that can be broken, this build could suffer potentially, but regardless of the cons, this build is more than powerful enough to take on the end game of Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. This should see you all the way to anomaly quests and beyond, making it for me a fun full set budget build for the Switch Axe. So there we have it, those are 2 full set budget builds I would recommend using for the Switch Axe to get you through the story of Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Obviously once you get to the point where you can start making mix sets, the mix sets will probably outshine these, but these are designed to get you through the game, especially if you don't have a lot of time to farm for mix sets. But what are your thoughts? Leave a comment down below, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you another guide for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak covering the budget builds for the Switch Axe. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.